Hello, miladies of inestimable value. The quietest person in the room isn't always shy. Sometimes they're just busy calculating your weaknesses. We live in a world obsessed with noise, louder voices, bolder personalities, and bigger egos. But here's a strange and uncomfortable truth. The most unsettling person in any room is often the one who isn't trying to be seen at all. Psychologists call it strategic detachment. Intelligence agencies call it non-verbal dominance. But in plain terms, it's the Sigma effect. And it's more unnerving than people care to admit. They don't argue. They don't chase clout. They don't play social games. And yet somehow, they win. Not because they're trying to dominate you, but because they've already left the board and you're still playing checkers. Scariest part? They're not mysterious, because they're hiding something. They're terrifying, because they have nothing to prove. You think you've seen quiet people before? You haven't met a Sigma. And no, they won't come for you. They'll just let you implode while sipping coffee like, damn, that's crazy. Let's talk about the real reasons Sigmas are feared. And trust me, it's not what you think. Number one, they're the one person you can't predict or replace. You can try to copy a Sigma. You might dress like them, talk like them, even adopt their calm, no-nonsense attitude. For a while, it might even work. People might think you've cracked the code. But deep down, something always feels off. That's because Sigmas aren't following a script. They are the script. What they do isn't an act. It's instinct, forged in solitude, sharpened by observation, and fueled by an unshakable sense of self. What really makes them terrifying isn't just that they're unpredictable. It's that they're unreplicable. They didn't become who they are by watching others or reading self-help books. They became that way by being brutally honest with themselves, even when it hurt. That's not something you can fake. It's the result of walking through mental fire and coming out colder, smarter, and quieter. People try to replace them, in relationships, in workspaces, in social circles, but it never works. You can't replace someone who didn't need to be there in the first place. Sigmas don't build their worth on attention or approval, so removing them doesn't take away a presence. It leaves a vacuum. You only realize what they brought after they've left. It's not noise or validation or constant energy. It's something harder to describe, a sense of clarity, detachment, even eerie calm. And once it's gone, everything else feels just a little more chaotic. They're not trying to be mysterious. They just don't broadcast themselves like most people do. They don't compete for attention because they know what they bring. And if no one notices, they're completely fine with that. That kind of confidence, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself, is rare. And for a world built on comparison and performance, it's terrifying. Because when someone can't be predicted, and definitely can't be replaced, they become unforgettable. And that right there is what truly scares people. Number two, they are immune to status, so they're unbuyable. Sigmas walk through a world obsessed with titles, likes, followers, and applause, and somehow none of it sticks to them. You can wave a high-ranking position in front of them, flash a luxury car, drop names, or throw money around, and they'll blink at you like you offered them a half-eaten sandwich. Not out of disrespect, but because it genuinely doesn't mean anything to them. Status is noise, and they've trained themselves to live in silence. They don't crave recognition because their self-worth was never built on it. They've already validated themselves in private, where it actually counts. So when society tries to seduce them with shiny objects and hollow prestige, it's like trying to bribe a lion with cat food. It just doesn't work. What makes this terrifying for others is that Sigmas are immune to the usual controls. Most people, even powerful ones, can be bought. Everyone has a price, right? But Sigmas break that rule. They don't have a price because they're not for sale. They don't want to climb your ladder. In fact, they'll question why the ladder even exists and whether it's worth burning down. You can't guilt them, tempt them, or flatter them into submission. They don't seek approval, so they're not afraid of losing it. That's dangerous, because you can't manipulate someone who doesn't want what you're offering. You can't control someone who doesn't care about the game. And that's the unnerving part. Sigmas are the one type of person who walks through power without bowing to it. They'll shake the hand of a billionaire and speak to a janitor with the same level of attention, not because they're trying to prove a point, but because status just doesn't impress them. And in a world built on hierarchy and ego, that makes them not just rare, but untouchable. Number 3, they don't fight you, they dissolve you. Sigmas don't argue, they don't clash, and they don't explode. They exit. And when they do, it's not with a slam of the door or a dramatic scene. It's silent, clean, and deeply unsettling. You're left standing there, trying to figure out what just happened. Because they didn't fight you. They just ceased to exist in your world. And that absence, it hits harder than any confrontation ever could. See, most people feed off conflict. They need it to feel powerful, validated, right. But Sigmas don't play that game. They don't need to win arguments because they've already decided what you're worth. And if it doesn't add up, they're gone. Not in anger, not in bitterness, just gone. And what's terrifying is that it's not to punish you. It's because they simply no longer see a reason to engage. What you realize later, sometimes weeks, sometimes years, is that they weren't just a person in the room, they were the room. They brought the energy, the gravity, the stability, and now, without them, things feel off. People notice the difference but can't quite name it. That eerie stillness, that missing focus, that was them. And when they dissolve you, they don't just walk away, they erase the emotional debt. No revenge, no closure, no drama. You don't even get the satisfaction of knowing whether they ever think about you. That's the part that haunts people. Not the goodbye, but the silence that follows it. It lingers because deep down you know they were never fighting you. They were just choosing not to waste their energy. And once a Sigma decides you're not worth it, you don't get a second vote. They don't destroy you with rage. They remove their presence and let the emptiness do the rest. Number 4, they don't want power, but they get it anyway. Sigmas never show up trying to lead, control, or dominate, and yet somehow they end up in charge without ever asking for it. While alphas broadcast their presence, fighting for attention and authority, Sigmas move in silence. They don't need to be in the spotlight to have influence. In fact, they often avoid it on purpose. But that's exactly what makes people turn toward them when things get serious. Why? Because there's something about someone who doesn't need power that makes them the most qualified to hold it. People instinctively trust Sigmas, not because they're loud or persuasive, but because they're grounded. They listen more than they speak. They observe before acting, and they carry themselves with quiet conviction. In chaotic situations, that calm becomes magnetic. Others start looking to them for answers, direction, even leadership, and it happens subtly, without a vote or announcement. One day you realize everyone's following the person who never tried to lead. That's what unnerves people. The fact that a Sigma doesn't play the game, yet wins anyway. They don't manipulate or scheme to climb the ranks. They rise because they're unaffected by the noise, and people can feel it. You can't fake that kind of presence. It comes from detachment, clarity, and brutal self-awareness. And here's where it gets even more unsettling. Sigmas know the power they hold. They see how people react to them, how rooms shift when they speak or choose not to, but they don't cling to that influence. They don't need it to feel whole. That indifference is chilling, because most people, once they get a taste of power, grip it tighter. Sigmas could let it all go tomorrow and still sleep just fine. That's the paradox. They don't want control, which is exactly why they're trusted with it. And because they're not emotionally attached to power, they become the one person in the room who can't be bribed, flattered, or manipulated. They get the crown not because they ask for it, but because everyone else quietly realizes they're the only one who doesn't need it. Number 5, they can read the room and choose to let you drown. Sigmas don't just walk into a room, they scan it, instantly, quietly. They take in everything, tone shifts, subtle power plays, fake smiles, insecure flexing. While others are talking, showing off, or trying to impress, the Sigma is already 10 moves ahead, reading people like open books. But here's the part that really unnerves people. They don't always act on what they see. Most people, once they spot weakness, will either call it out or use it. Sigmas don't bother. If they see you're insecure, fake, manipulative, or in over your head, they won't warn you, embarrass you, or save you. They'll simply watch. Because to them, some lessons are best learned through collapse. They're not being cruel. They just understand that interference is a waste of energy. And more often than not, people who are spiraling need to hit the wall before they realize it. The Sigma's silence in these moments is what makes them terrifying. Not because they're heartless, but because they know exactly what's happening and choose not to intervene. They don't interrupt your downfall. They let it unfold, with the stillness of someone watching a predictable storm roll in. They're like surgeons in a psychological operating room. They see the flaw, the ticking time bomb in someone's ego or plan, and rather than rushing to fix it, they study it. Not out of sadism, but curiosity. It's data, and in many cases, confirmation of what they already suspected. People mistake this for coldness, but it's control. While others get caught in drama, Sigmas are detached. Emotion doesn't cloud their judgment. They'll let you talk yourself into a corner, power trip your way into isolation, or reveal your own lies, all while they sip their drink, nod politely, and say absolutely nothing, because they don't need to destroy you. You're already doing it yourself. They're just letting gravity do its job. Number 6, they are walking contradictions, and it disorients people. Sigmas are full of contradictions that shouldn't make sense, but somehow they do. They're calm but intense, detached but deeply observant, silent yet nothing gets past them. One minute they seem completely indifferent. The next they say something so sharp and precise it cuts straight to the core. People can't figure out where they stand, what they want, or what they're thinking. And that mental fog they create is exactly what throws others off. Most people are predictable. You can read their intentions based on how they act, what they want, or how they respond under pressure. But Sigmas don't give you that. They'll show signs of not caring, then make a move so decisive it knocks everyone sideways. They can blend into the background one moment and dominate the entire energy of a room the next. That duality is disorienting, because your brain doesn't know which version is real. And the truth is, both are. It's hard to fight someone who doesn't stick to a pattern. If you challenge them expecting silence, you might get a razor-sharp observation instead. If you expect them to react emotionally, they'll respond with eerie calm. You can't throw them off balance because they live off balance, and that makes them nearly impossible to corner. This internal contradiction is what makes Sigmas so psychologically slippery. People try to label them introvert, alpha, rebel, lone wolf, but none of it fully fits. The moment you think you understand them, they do something that completely rewrites your idea of who they are. And not because they're trying to confuse you. They're just not interested in fitting into anyone's framework. That's what unsettles people most. Sigmas refuse to be categorized. You can't box them in, predict their moves, or decode their motives. They're the glitch in the system, operating with both control and chaos. And when someone plays by rules you can't see, there's no way to win. Number 7, they learn from chaos, not comfort. Most people try to avoid chaos. They crave comfort, predictability, and stability on us. And when things go wrong, they panic, freeze, or shut down. But Sigmas, they lean in. Chaos doesn't shake them, it sharpens them. When life falls apart, they don't beg for peace. They analyze the wreckage. They treat betrayal, failure, and conflict like data. They don't just survive it, they mine it for insight. A Sigma going through hell isn't a victim. They're an investigator. While others ask, why is this happening to me? A Sigma is already asking, what is this teaching me? That mindset alone is what separates them. Pain doesn't paralyze them, it clarifies. And that's terrifying to people who rely on comfort to function. Where most people seek soft landings and support systems, Sigmas train themselves to grow in isolation. They'll go through heartbreak, loss, betrayal, and mental warfare, and come out quieter, smarter, and harder to reach. Not broken, upgraded, because they don't waste chaos. They use it like fuel. It's not that they enjoy suffering, they just know it's one of the few places where real, permanent growth happens. They'll study how someone betrayed them, not to cry over it, but to map the psychology behind it. They'll pick apart their own failures, not to wallow, but to find the blind spots no one else will tell them about. They see conflict as a tool, a way to test people, systems, and themselves. And when the storm passes, that's when it hits you. The Sigma who went into the chaos isn't the one who comes out. They've evolved, they've leveled up, they've gathered insights that most people avoid their whole lives. And now, they're more detached, more strategic, and harder to shake than ever. That's what makes them dangerous. Not their strength, but how they built it. Not in safety, not in praise, but in the darkest, most unstable places where most people fall apart. Sigmas don't run from those places. That's where they train. Number 8. They have the discipline of a monk, but the mind of a wolf. On the surface, Sigmas look calm, almost too calm. They're composed, quiet, and seem completely unbothered, like nothing rattles them. To the outside world, they give off monk-like stillness. No emotional outbursts, no attention-seeking, no chaos. But that's only half the story. What people don't see, and what makes them so unnerving, is what's happening beneath that still exterior. A relentless, hyper-focused mind that never stops scanning, calculating, planning. While others are reacting emotionally or chasing distractions, the Sigma is already 10 steps ahead. They study people's words, tone, posture, inconsistencies. They see patterns where others see noise. And while they may sit quietly in the corner, they're mentally mapping out every variable in the room. Not for drama, not for ego, for precision. They don't need to dominate the moment, because they're already building the next move in silence. This dual nature, the calm of a monk with the mind of a wolf, throws people off. You can't tell whether they're being passive or patient. You don't know if they're indifferent or deeply aware, and that's the trap. The moment you underestimate them, you've already lost, because while you were trying to read their silence, they already read you. And the scariest part? You'll never get the full blueprint. Sigmas never reveal the entire plan. They show just enough to keep you guessing, and then let you fill in the blanks, usually with the wrong assumptions. That unpredictability is their shield. You can't stop what you can't track. They don't just think differently, they train themselves to. Their discipline comes from solitude, self-control, and brutal self-awareness. But their instincts? Sharp, strategic, sometimes ruthless. They don't move emotionally. They move with intent, always watching, always refining. So while you're lulled by their calm presence, just know this: behind that quiet is a mind wired for survival and strategy. And by the time you realize they've moved, it's already too late. Number 9, you never know what they're truly capable of. Sigmas never advertise their abilities. They're not the type to walk into a room listing their achievements, flexing their skills, or dropping hints about how capable they are. In fact, they often let people assume they're average, or even unimpressive. And that's the trap. Because by the time you realize what they are really capable of, it's already done. They've already moved, planned, executed, and won without making a sound. Their power lies in restraint. While others are busy showing off, Sigmas are storing energy. While most people rush to prove themselves, Sigmas study, wait, and calculate. They're not interested in applause or validation. They're interested in results. And because they don't give you anything to measure them by, you never see them coming. That unpredictability is their most lethal advantage. What terrifies people is that there's no obvious limit to what a Sigma can do. Just because they don't talk about their talents doesn't mean they don't have them. They could have survival skills, deep knowledge in psychology, financial expertise, creative genius. You'll never know. Not until it directly affects you. They don't show their depth, they hide it. Not out of insecurity, but because mystery gives them power. If no one knows what you're capable of, no one knows how to stop you, and they don't get loud when they win. There's no celebration, no bragging, no mic drop. Just silence, which makes the impact even more brutal. You don't realize you've been outplayed until you look back and connect the dots. And by then, they've already moved on. You can't prepare for someone who reveals nothing, and that's why Sigmas make people uneasy. Not because they seem powerful, but because they hide how powerful they actually are. It's not the noise you should fear, it's the silence that doesn't flinch. Number 10. They can destroy egos without saying a word. Sigmas don't need to throw punches or launch verbal attacks to dismantle someone's ego. They operate on a level where words are often unnecessary. A glance from a Sigma can cut deeper than any insult, and a simple silence can expose more cracks in your confidence than 1,000 arguments. They don't confront you head-on because they know that the most effective way to destroy ego isn't by fighting it. It's by quietly pulling the rug out from under it. It's subtle, surgical, and devastating. Imagine someone who watches your every move with unflinching calm, catching every inconsistency, every attempt to impress or dominate. Then, at just the right moment, they do something so small, a raised eyebrow, a slow blink, a deliberate step back, and suddenly you feel exposed. Your carefully built facade feels flimsy. Your self-importance starts to crumble, not because they said anything harsh, but because they refused to play along. What's terrifying is how effortless it is for them. They don't need drama, shouting, or confrontation. Their weapon is indifference, and that's far worse for fragile egos. When you're used to people reacting with noise, emotion, or even aggression, meeting someone who simply doesn't care is disarming. You realize that your usual tactics don't work. They see through the illusion, and instead of tearing it down loudly, they just let it fall apart on its own. And once it starts to unravel, there's no putting the pieces back together the same way. Sigmas don't rebuild your ego. They leave you to face what's real beneath it. That kind of quiet destruction is a power most people can't handle. Because the loss isn't loud or violent. It's a cold, creeping realization that the person you thought you were doesn't hold up under their gaze. Number 11. They have zero loyalty to social norms. What truly rattles society isn't the loud rebel banging on the door, but the quiet one who doesn't even acknowledge the door's existence. Sigmas aren't outlaws or rule breakers for the sake of chaos. They simply don't care about the rules everyone else scrambles to follow. It's not defiance, it's apathy. They've evolved beyond the social contracts that most people treat like lifelines. They don't posture or perform to fit in. They don't jump through hoops because tradition says so, or because they want approval. Their zero loyalty to social norms means they navigate life on a personal code that's invisible to the rest of the world. This makes them unpredictable and uncomfortable for anyone invested in the rules of the game. What terrifies others is that Sigmas don't seek permission or validation. They don't play by the script because, to them, it's amateurish. Society tries to control people by setting boundaries and expectations, but Sigmas don't operate on that grid. They move sideways, diagonally, or not at all, depending on what feels authentic. They're not trying to upset the balance, they simply don't see the balance as binding. This indifferent detachment from social norms creates a kind of power that's hard to contain. While others scramble to climb ladders built by those norms, Sigmas quietly step off and forge new paths. That's what scares society the most. Someone who's neither playing the game nor trying to change it, but who's just done with it altogether. They aren't threats because they're loud or aggressive. They're threats because they expose how arbitrary and fragile the system really is. A Sigma's disregard for social norms reveals that the so-called rules are just suggestions, and that freedom comes from simply refusing to be constrained by them. Number 12. They don't need validation, so you can't manipulate them. Sigmas are nearly impossible to manipulate because they've already detached from the things most people use to control others. They don't need your approval. They don't need to be liked. They don't care about being seen, praised, or placed on some imaginary pedestal. That emotional distance people often mislabel as cold isn't weakness, it's armor, and it wasn't handed to them. They built it themselves, through solitude, reflection, rejection, and choosing to stand alone even when it would have been easier to conform. That's the terrifying part for manipulators. There are no levers to pull. You can't flatter them into submission, because compliments don't feed their self-worth. You can't shame them into obedience because they don't fear being alone. And you definitely can't dangle power, popularity, or prestige in front of them, because those things don't hold value in their world. Most people are wired to seek validation. It's human nature. That's why social pressure works so well. But Sigmas rewired themselves. They questioned everything, especially the systems that taught them what to value. So now, when someone tries to box them in, they don't resist. They just step sideways, out of reach, watching with quiet clarity while the game continues without them. And the most unnerving part, they won't explain themselves. They won't argue or try to correct your misjudgment. They'll just disappear from the situation, mentally, emotionally, or physically, and let you figure out what went wrong. That silence isn't passive, it's a choice, a boundary, a line that no amount of persuasion can cross. You can't manipulate someone who doesn't need what you're offering. That's why Sigmas are so dangerously free. Because they've already let go of everything that keeps most people tangled. They don't need the world's permission to be who they are. And that makes them untouchable. At the end of the day, the scariest thing about a Sigma isn't what they do. It's what they don't do. They don't beg for attention. They don't chase power. They don't play by the rules. And they don't react the way you expect them to. That's what makes them unsettling. You can't read someone who's unreadable. You can't fight someone who refuses to engage. And you can't manipulate someone who has no desire for the bait society uses to control others. Sigmas are rare because they've detached from everything most people are deeply addicted to: approval, recognition, status, hierarchy, conformity. They've stripped all that away, and what's left is something dangerous, something clean, something ungoverned. Not chaotic, but sovereign, not wild, but free. They're not interested in being above you, below you, or against you. They're simply not playing the game at all. That's why they move in silence and still shift the entire energy of a room. That's why they disappear. And everything suddenly feels colder. That's why you don't realize their impact until they're already gone. They don't need to announce their intelligence. It reveals itself when you try to outthink them and find yourself 3 steps behind. They don't need to prove their strength. You feel it when your ego starts to crack under their calm gaze. And they don't destroy you with aggression. They let you unravel yourself in the vacuum of their quiet absence. That's their real power. It's not loud, it's not visible, it's not even always understood, but it is absolutely felt. In a world addicted to noise, Sigmas are the silence that lingers. In a society obsessed with surface, they are depth with no bottom. They don't burn bridges, they simply vanish, and take the gravity of the entire structure with them. That's the truth. Sigmas don't intimidate because they're trying to. They do it by simply being exactly who they are. Unbothered, unreadable, and utterly untamed. And that's what makes them the most quietly dangerous force in the room. If you found this deep dive into the mind of a Sigma intriguing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss content that challenges the ordinary. Like the video, if it made you rethink everything you thought you knew, drop a comment below with your own experiences or thoughts. I want to hear what you think. And if you know someone who needs to understand the quiet power of a Sigma, share this video with them. Let's keep the conversation going and uncover more truths together.